Okay, everyone, sorry for the slight technical glitch earlier. We hope that this is going to be a smooth sailing. This time, hopefully, will all be okay. We're joined live once again by the great, the brilliant Ami Kozak, who is both a comedian, impersonator, but also has the most incredible insight and analysis into what's happening geopolitically in our world today. Ami is joining us from Nashville, where he's working on some comedic sketches, but in his spare time, he helps us solve the world's problems. And Ami, there's so much to talk about. And one of the things that I feel isn't really being unpacked right now, because everyone's so focused on the constant movements of what's happening in the Israel-Iran war, is that there's actually a divide, a rupture that we're seeing, I think, emerging on the MAGA right, on the American right. Now, of course, this has been growing. It's been bubbling under the surface for quite a while. But I wonder whether this could be the moment where we actually see like a full-on split. Because what's happening now touches on so many nerves, so many raw nerves. And I'm talking specifically about the isolationist right, the Tucker Carlsons, I don't really want to put them in, deep intellectual leagues, but in terms of influencers, the Dave Smiths and the Candace Owens, etc., etc. And then there's the people who are full-on interventionists, the Lindsey Grahams and others. And then there's people in the middle, and it seems like Trump is kind of there. But can you just we'll talk about, and I'll bring up some tweets in a second from various pundits, but can you just sort of unpack what you're sort of seeing from like an aerial view?
Mm-hmm. Well, Tucker's acting kooky. That's what I was saying. This has been brewing for a while. If you follow this stuff closely, it's kind of like the two parents who've been fighting for a while, and then now there's finally the divorce that's kind of coming to fruition, seeing how things are playing out on the world stage. This was always the case, that MAGA sort of had within it a bit of isolationism, some of which is understandable and some of which is just hateful, rooted in anti-Zionism or even as far as anti-Semitism. And not everybody involved, and all the players and pundits and commentary folks involved, fall neatly into each category, depending on who you're talking to. Some are just vicious anti-Semites who are like, it's the Jews, Mossad controls everything. We know who that is. There's people who are just saying it's Mossad, it's globalists that are secretly cabals controlling our foreign policy. But then that kind of talking point extends, where in the form of explicit anti-Semitism from some folks out there, the type of language echoes in the form of, it's not Jews control, it's AIPAC. Right? AIPAC controlling. It's the same narrative, kind of sanitized depending on who's making it. And it starts to gain or lose validity depending on how far you go with it. And then the kids caught in between this mess are sort of the, I think, fair-minded people like Charlie Kirk and other folks who really just don't want America involved in foreign. There's been such a, sorry, you see me okay?
You're a little bit out of... Yeah, we got you again now, yeah.
There's been such a foreign...
by the way, if possible, try not to move your camera too much, because that's when we can sometimes get a bit of a unstable connection. So
yeah, I'm trying to hold it, but we'll do the best we can. There's a PTSD going on from foreign entanglements and previous entanglements, where people look at Iraq and Afghanistan as such mistakes and blunders and quagmires that we got ourselves into, and that's fair. But just because those wars were a mistake does not mean every war or conflict to be involved in or fund or defend is a mistake.
Yeah.
And the way I see it, it's like if you were treating a patient with an illness and for years you treated the wrong illness or you had the wrong diagnoses, that doesn't mean when you find the right one, potentially, you just ignore it because I'm against treatment.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this was, look what Charlie Kirk said. I got it up on screen here. He retweeted Lindsey Graham saying, "I would like to see this regime fall. If we don't take out their nuclear program now, we'll all regret it. We're very close. Be all in, Mr. President, in helping Israel finish the job." And Charlie Kirk said, "This is insane. Regime change will result in a bloody civil war, killing hundreds of thousands, creating another massive Muslim refugee crisis. Toppling a leader is never as easy as you think. It almost always results in further involvement, a civil war, and chaos."
Okay, that's a fair argument to make. That's very different than a lot of people out there who are adjacent to Charlie Kirk, not Charlie Kirk, who are saying, "I want Israel to lose."
Yeah.
Sorry, the cameras are in different directions here. Okay, that's very different than saying, "I want Israel to lose. I stand with Iran. Israel is the aggressor. Israel is the villain." So I'm discerning enough to tell the difference. And Charlie's very clearly pro-Israel, pro-civilization, pro-West, wants Israel to succeed. The question is to what extent America should involve itself, if at all. How should America aid Israel? Fair arguments to make. We should be prudent. We shouldn't just jump on a bandwagon. America should act in its own self-interest and self-defense. I agree with all of that. And then there are fair-minded people who can disagree onto the extent, onto the implementation. But you just have to be mindful of like which actors out there are just nefarious for self-aggrandizement and for audience growth to perpetuate this narrative, which is very sort of anti the MAGA spirit and anti the conservative spirit, which is to say, you would think it's one thing on the progressive, far Marxist left that wants Western civilization to collapse. And so they share the common enemy that the Islamists have, which is, defeat of Western dominance and undermining of the West. So they have that in common. But on the right, you would think pro-military, pro-defense, pro-Western, all of a sudden to take this posture against Israel as it's claiming that it's dragging the U.S. into some sort of thing. And then if Iran attacks American bases, that's Israel's fault. Isn't it Iran's fault? Isn't it the Iranian regime's fault? They attack American bases. Whatever happened to just basic logic? If the Iranian regime doesn't have to attack American bases, but when they choose to, it's Israel's fault because Israel has to act in its own self-defense and self-interest. It's like, what about the Iranian regime? It's like we've lost the ability to have moral culpability and accountability here. And yeah, I just think it's a very revealing kind of time where when the real stuff hits the fan, all of a sudden it shows the true colors of where people really are. All this time they've been saying, "Oh, Israel's being indiscriminate in Gaza," but then when Israel is discriminate and very precise and demonstrates its ability to do that in a different scenario in Iran, now those people either have to support Israel or then condemn it and reveal that it's just been about not being pro-Palestinian, but being about being anti-Israel. Like that's a different position.
Right.
It itself Absolutely. A little bit. And haters and podcasters who sit very comfortably in the West, pointing fingers, and then go back to their lives doing stand-up or podcasting, whatever it is that they do. You realize that they really don't. Their opinions are not consequential. It doesn't really matter. They don't face any of the risk or of any of this stuff. And then they just scream and yell, but it's all just static noise. And then the real stuff has to get done. I had another thing I wanted to point out, which is interesting, but I forgot what it was. So let's keep going.
Well, I'm sure it'll come up again because it's all kind of similar issues. Yeah. Candace Owens said in reaction to Trump's truth, I don't know what you call a tweet on his site. Do you call it he posts a truth? Where he said, somebody please explain to kooky Tucker Carlson that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And then Candace said, Trump has completely fractured his base and he did it for the very neocons who minted the Never Trump movement. Truly unbelievable. What's your reaction?
They fractured the base. The idea that Trump is exactly what he said he was the entire time. Like, he's not sending in troops to Iran, not invading Iran. Israel is fighting battles. That doesn't mean that America is not an ally and provide some assistance or whatever that may be. Israel doing exactly what you've demanded it do, which is fight its own battles, all of a sudden is cause for this fracture. I mean, at the end of the day, it's very revealing. Israel fights its own battles, it gets condemned. America fights Israel's battles, supposedly, it gets condemned. So None of that stuff really matters. It's all just static noise. In terms of fracturing the base, I don't know. Some of it's just theater. Um, I can understand the idea of not wanting to be involved in foreign entanglements and stuff, but Israel's doing most of the work. Israel's putting most of its soldiers and its civilians in harm's way. Americans at this point aren't, especially American civilians who sit across an ocean. And so, yeah,
Do you, I mean, do you have any
I don't know
sense
where this
of?
will lead in terms of Trump. I think actually, yeah.
Go
Go
for it.
ahead.
Go for it. Please, please.
No, I think ultimately, if in a few years from now we see further normalization between Israel and the Arab world, and potentially a regime collapse in Iran that leads to a secularization and a modernization of Iran, a return to what Iran once was, for pre the revolution, the Islamic Revolution, that's been nothing but repressive and tyrannical and authoritarian and a theocracy. Trump could get a Nobel Peace Prize for something like this. And most of this stuff is just noise.
Yeah.
So
I mean, do you have a sense of what the ratios are in the Trump base among like the ones who will like love people like Tucker and Candace and Dave Smith, and those who are much more aligned with what has traditionally been views of the conservative right?
well, Dave Smith is not like a MAGA Trump guy. He's in like that libertarian isolationist side of things. First of all, I would imagine like MAGA and a lot of the Trump support is exactly that. It's Trump they like.
Mm.
It's his temperament, personality, style, charisma. That's why candidates win. It's people trust in their charisma, their ability to connect with them. That's how Obama won, even Bush. Ever since TV, the more charismatic candidate wins. And we were facing real problems, I think, and a need to bust like the woke bubble and the dominance of left-wing excess woke culture. People wanted out of that. That's still true about Trump. Um, so I think a lot of these people make a lot of noise and sort of manufacture this outrage. Uh, I think a lot of it maybe will come down to what the economy does here, what other things will happen down the road. But to use this as an excuse as to why things are not working here, I think is where it gets pretty nefarious.
But
They use these foreign wars and affairs. Sorry, they use these foreign entanglements, frame them as such, foreign entanglements, as the reason why America is suffering, and there's not anything else to be done about it. So they can use that as sort of a scapegoat, almost.
right.
Um, how it will play out. I mean, Trump has proven, he's pretty unbeatable in being able to maintain the loyalty of his base that love what he's been able to do like nobody else. He flipped the entire culture politically and culturally 180 from being persona non grata to one of the most like popular presidents. No one's done that in the commentariat space. Uh, you know, what Trump has done? I mean, Tucker left Fox and built his own audience. It's not that big of a leap. He hasn't flipped an entire audience core of people who trust him, like him, support him. Like, Trump's expanded his fan base and umbrella. The other people have only lost them. A lot of those people in sort of the MAGA commentariat. They've lost followers and credibility in a lot of ways, even if they've gained other audiences that I don't think are the best company to keep, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's really interesting. So you're not necessarily saying that you think there's going to be a rupture here. This is more just noise. It's more just theater. That's essentially what you're saying.
Well, I think if you just take a bird's eye view and you're like watching from a distance and you're like, wait a minute, okay, here are the sides here. You have the solidarity encampments of Gaza who have been burning American flags and Israeli flags and breaking into Grand Central Station. If I look at the mullahs of Iran, if I look at the rallies that they're having, throwing their hands up saying death to America, and then I look on Twitter and see who's condemning them or Israel and America. Like, if you don't know much and you have to do a Pascal's wager here, like whose side am I on here? It seems pretty in line with the West and Western civilization and the values of America, the values of Israel, the values of the majority of sensible Americans who aren't involved in this sort of drama, you know?
Yeah.
Um, And like, I see in the long game, it feels very concerning sometimes, especially for Jews and the Jewish community. I still think there's a silent majority out there that's sensible and can see the difference between Israel and its enemies, and can see why America would align itself with Israel, and it'd be much more, uh, call it dangerous or totally antithetical to American values and principles to align with any other actors in the region that, with the exception of Israel and those willing to make peace with Israel. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
maybe
And
I'm optimistic, but that's
isn't the fundamental error that people are making when they say, no, we can't do interventionism because look how it failed when we tried it in Iraq and Afghanistan? Isn't the key difference here that here you're not dealing with a people that are in any way aligned with the philosophy of their regime or the extremism of their regime? In this case, you actually have a people who are in many ways suppressed and oppressed by their people, a moderate people that are ruled by an extremist minority.
it certainly seems that way. But I think it reveals the profound ignorance of most people who don't know a lot but have a lot of takes when it comes to
Right.
the Middle East and the region and the conflict, and to the extent to which Iran has been funding terrorism and terrorist proxies against Israel, not just for the last 18 months, but for 30 years. And people don't know that. They think Israel aggressed against Iran and attacked Iran as if it's out of nowhere. And what's funny is a lot of the libertarian isolationists will be very quick to condemn America for provoking hostility against it because they've been funding proxies and entanglements in foreign affairs, so that when 9/11 happens or America gets attacked or troops get attacked, who do they blame? Not those attacking Americans, but for American provocation. But when Israel is constantly provoked by the proxies attacking it and responds, suddenly Israel's solely the aggressor. Does anybody see the crazy double standard hypocrisy here? Israel's the aggressor, and Iran has been attacked and is on defense. Well, that's interesting. It has a very "fu mom" vibe. You know, it's very easy to condemn the very governments that protect your rights to do so. You know, it's a privileged
Yeah.
position to take, to say America's inviting all this. They don't believe in good and evil. They don't believe in morally judging different kinds of cultures and regimes. The only reason bad things happen in the world is because the morally superior countries provoke it. They believe that they can police the world, and therefore that only invites a response. I'd say the negative responses and vibes towards America and hostility precedes the way America reacts to it. It
Yeah.
exists and it precedes it. And to be naive to that means that you can be against war all you like, and you'll be bound to die in one when somebody tries to attack you. You know, it's always nice to be anti-war as long as everyone is anti-war. The second somebody isn't, you have a choice to make. Keep being anti-war and die, or defend from those who want it.
Army, did you just study politics and government at college?
No, I went to music school.
Doesn't make sense to me, honestly. It's just your insight is just so spot on. So Ambassador Mike Huckabe sent a message to President Trump, which he put out clearly trying to, impress his, I'm sure, in particular, his evangelical base, where Mike Huckabe is saying, Mr. President, I believe you were spared by God in that moment where you could have been assassinated for this very moment. Just imagine for us, and forgive me, this is a slightly leading question, but can you just imagine for us what world we'd be in now if Kamala Harris was president? What would she be saying right now?
Don't. Don't. I think, and in all seriousness, it's funny. Yeah, Mike's the man. He's just like, Mr. President, I believe your life was spared. And you know what? Judea and Samaria and all of Israel belongs to Israel. I believe sovereignty. You know what? He's a Southern gentleman. I've met Mike Huckabe. And what kind of bass do you play? He's a real gentleman. And you know what? I love that. Kamala Harris, Biden, Obama would all be saying the same thing. We are working with our partners to make sure that we de-escalate the escalation of the escalators that are taking us not up, but down. And what we need to do is to stabilize and regionalize the region by which we extend our partners in the area that surround Iran, which is Iraq, and Yemen, that make sure that Israel has its ability to defend itself, but also must de-escalate to bring a ceasefire immediately. What, you think they're just dropping coconut trees? This is missiles, which are fire. Can I have a drink?
Oh my god. No, I can see her like the most critical moment, like talking to the press, being like, so there's this country, Iran, and Iran is near Israel, and Iran wants to get nuclear weapons. You know?
Which is the weapon that's nuclear. Now let me explain something. I was in California. That's where I was Attorney General. I think. What was she? What did I do? I don't know. I was trying to get to be. But I worked in LA. I worked in California, and we have Los Angeles. And the amount of Iranians that live in Los Angeles, my concern is that Bibi might accidentally attack Los Angeles, thinking it's Tehran. I shouldn't have said that.
Oh gosh, it's hilarious, but it's terrifying.
I remember what I wanted to say before, though, and it's going to come across as reckless. But one thing that shocks me about the MAGA crowd that's suspicious of Israel's actions, or is kind of, you know, if I have to put it in a way that I think they could relate to, MAGA's very pro-gun and gun rights, right? Pro-defense and pro-Second Amendment. If you extend that idea to countries, right? They always say in the pro-gun rights movement, you know, the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, right? It's the great equalizer. And so, even though this may sound reckless, I don't mean it this way, but logically extend that to say the only way to stop a bad guy who might have a nuke is a good guy with a nuke. Now, that doesn't mean using them. It means deterring them.
Of course.
In other words, we're talking about deterring nefarious, evil, genocidal regimes from being able to carry out their aims, which they've been very explicit in saying they want to do. Wipe Israel off the map, attack America, attack Europe, have dominance, establish a caliphate. And how do we stop those people? The idea is you have to stop them militarily because they have aspirations that are violent, that are aggressive, that they wish to attack their neighbors. Now, MAGA should understand such a thing because they don't take this utopian view that we can just have peace and everyone just goes along with it. They understand in the context of gun control, oh, we should just get rid of all the guns and nobody will attack each other. They know that there is a positive externality that in certain cities with that allow for people to carry and defend themselves, that they can defend against those and gives them an advantage against those who may attack them. And so they understand deterrence if they really think about it, and preventative measures to prevent such countries from acquiring the means to carry out their genocidal aspirations.
Well, this is the key point that I try to get across to people. We have, other than President Trump and America, other Western countries, they're standing up and saying exactly what you said Harris would be saying, which is, we call for de-escalation right now. We need to de-escalate. And it's like, isn't taking out Iran's nuclear capacity, isn't that a de-escalation? Wouldn't it be a form of escalation to just sit back and let them get a nuke?
Well, this is always sort of the liberal premise. It's always easy to, it's always simple to say, well, there's a visible cost that's happening now, and I don't see the unseen cost of doing nothing.
Right.
In other words, it happens in economics all the time. We pass taxes and spending and all these things. They're like, oh, look at all the seen benefit. On the flip side, they see, look at all this. We're spending and building this building. What they don't see is all the inefficiency, all the productive measures that could have gone elsewhere to actually wealth-producing endeavors. So they always look at seen benefit and they don't look at the unseen cost. In this case, there's a seen cost of war. It's visible. You see destruction. It's horrible. What they don't see is the unseen cost of doing nothing. And it's a hard case to make. Preemption is a hard case to make. But look at October 7th and look at the things that you do when you allow Iran to enrich itself and fund global terrorism and terrorism against Israel. All of a sudden it shows itself, and what happens? Everyone goes silent and they don't know what to do with themselves. And there's a massive I told you so moment. Israel's not willing to take that risk, and they shouldn't be.
Absolutely.
I told you so for Israel results in lots of dead Israelis, even if it means America just watches from a distance. And so it's come to this point. What can you do?
And what do you make of Piers Morgan, who once again we're seeing him flip flopping? Just last week, outraged by Israel entirely, and now he sees that like a lot of people are saying, well, including Iranians, well, we support what Israel's doing here. Suddenly, he's cheerleading and defending what Israel's doing. What do you make of his latest antics?
Look, Pierce is a talk show host. He's got a show. He's got a massive audience. All true. And that's his prerogative to have a show that appeals to a mass audience and does these topics that are very relevant. The advantage to that is that he gives people a platform to be able to say those views and express those views. The only thing I don't appreciate is when he doesn't allow them to express their views.
Yes.
That's the problem. When he uses people presumably seemingly as props and tools so that he can express his views, I just don't see that as so productive. And it's kind of disingenuous to have two people on to play a game and you be the referee and not let one team play, as we saw with Natasha versus Dave Smith. I don't think that's good for Natasha, certainly. And it's not good for Dave Smith either. It makes Dave Smith's arguments look a lot weaker if he can't actually defend them because Natasha's not being allowed to present them. And then, at the end of the day, though, I understand how this game works. And I respect the fact that, he's found a way to create a platform that's relevant and stays on the topics that appeal to lots of people. That's a skill, and I respect that. I respect that. I appreciate when he does at least give people equal time. When he doesn't, it's frustrating. And I don't judge people who don't want to go on. I don't judge people who do go on. Use it to the advantage of getting your message out and getting your point out. As long as the only time I take real issue is if he doesn't let you get your point out, because then what's the point? It's not, I'm challenging the BS. I'm challenging it. Well, you haven't even heard the BS. So how are you challenging it? So like if my only issue is if you're going to host a debate and referee it, let both teams play.
Yeah. Ami, ever the diplomat. You said that very moderately, and that was very, very fair comment. We just got a few minutes left with Ami, but please do post any questions you have for Ami in the chat box, and I'll try and get to them. We've got a lot of comments from people, but it'd be good if you have any questions. Just while we continue to talk a bit about the right and a potential rupture, or maybe not rupture, as you're saying. It's just interesting to understand how some people on the right come to be more pro-Israel, more anti-Israel. We've spoken a lot about the anti-Israel lot and the psychology behind that. I think we did Candace Owens in a previous chat. But I'm curious about, and I won't be upset if you want to do a little impression as well here when you talk about him. But Jordan Peterson, what do you think it is that informs his deep support for Israel? Is it religion? Is it political ideology?
Well, what do you mean by believe? What do you mean by Israel? It's the struggle with God. I think what informs it, I mean, it's not hard for me to imagine why someone would support Israel, because I'm obviously biased, and it's obvious to me why you would, in the sense that if you're a good, decent human being who cares about freedom, Western civilization, tolerance, freedom of religion, speech, anyone sensible could see the difference between Israel and its enemies. And if you woke up in Israel or in Tel Aviv, you'd find yourself in a very similar place to most places in the West. So that's the give for the average person. Jordan Peterson, if that's a psychologist, for one thing about this, Jordan has a lot of reverence, first of all, to story, narrative, the biblical stories, I think he recognizes what a lot of Jews recognize in themselves, the sort of Jewish role in the world, how Jews see themselves as the light unto the nations to bring godliness into the world. I think in a sense, Jordan gets asked these very technical questions about what does he mean by God and believe what is God to you. But I think godliness, or to bring that kind of message of, sort of uplifting, paving the way to heaven in a sort of theoretical sense, figurative sense, like that's very much a Jewish value that Jordan embodies. Connecting Greece and Jerusalem, the logos, knowledge, and paving the way towards heaven. You have two choices in this world: descending to hell or ascending to heaven. And I would imagine Jordan has always always admired the contributions of what Jews have brought in ascending to heaven by elevating, by focusing on scholarship, knowledge, practice, ritual, the ability to, Jordan's whole message about survival, adapting, never making excuses, despite the environment around you, cleaning your room. I mean, no one's figuratively cleaned their room and gone out into the abyss to face the struggle, to face the belly of the beast more than the Jews. And the fact that they're still here and have persevered through that, you know, to lead by sort of example, not demanding anything, but simply, you know, striving to live, thrive, as embodied by the community, the culture, and the state itself, amongst and against all odds, amongst foes, enemies, against all odds, to not only survive, but thrive. I mean, that is as Jordan Peterson-esque a message as I could imagine, even though lobster is not kosher.
What a great answer. Wow. That was, I mean, everything you say is so insightful, but I keep just being bowled over by this brilliant analysis. Before we finish, let's just take one final question from the chat. Annabelle asks, is anti-Semitism a bug or a feature of Judaism, in your view?
Well, you know, I hate bugs. No, is it a bug or a feature?
I wouldn't want to hear Kamala answer that one.
If we look to the scriptures, if we look to the Torah, we have been told that this is the trade-off. It is the story of Joseph and the brothers. The one who's chosen is resented by the ones who aren't for a certain mission, or the sacrifice that's accepted by Abel is resented by Cain. You know, from its very inception, we are instructed of this notion in reality itself, that there's things that are accepted and things that are rejected, things that are chosen and things that are not chosen. And this doesn't mean anything other than this idea that the cost of persevering or success, surviving, is that you can harbor the resentment of those that wish to bring you down, or those that can't bring themselves up, and so they have a choice: blame others or blame themselves. And people seldom blame themselves in those scenarios. B'nai Yisrael means to struggle with God. So by its very inception, the people are born as Jews in conflict, in struggle with God himself. This is the friction that I think creates. You know, that's how you get creative. Any creative endeavor is born out of friction. Anything that is created in the image of God, this idea that there's like a friction, there's a tension. I think Jews exist within that tension. And we've seen it historically. It doesn't mean they deserve the hate, but it's maybe not a feature of the Jews. It's a feature of humanity. And it's the Jews' mission to succeed and fulfill their duty in spite of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I remember learning recently from Rabbi Manis Friedman, who I believe you also interviewed recently, where he said that Jews believe in going to war, but it doesn't necessarily mean always military war. War simply means I see something bad in the world and I want to fix it, remove it, elevate it. And that's ultimately it's that whole point of friction, exactly as you said. And anyone ultimately that believes in wanting to improve the world, make it better, believes in going to war. And sometimes it has to descend into military, but hopefully it can stay in the realm of the ideological and the social. But Ami, thank you so much as ever for your insights and time today. I know we got a bit confused on the timings of doing it today, so I really appreciate you doing this from your car.
Sure.
And thank you as always for your insights. I'm sorry that the connection was a little bit choppy, but really appreciate your time.
My pleasure, Ollie, as always.
Thanks so much. Thanks everyone for watching. See you on the next one.